The video that I'm taking is much bigger than I expected, a little bit higher than I expected. Well, welcome everybody. Look at that. We got a soda can right there. Welcome to Revolution. It is Pride Month. Happy Pride. It's June 1st. Oh my goodness, my daughter's birthday is this month. I've got to get ready for that. A lot going on in the old town. Horrible things happening if you're paying attention right now in the world. I hope you're all speaking out and revolting and marching and doing all the things you feel you need to do if you love your neighbors and brothers and sisters out there who are going through just hell. Scary thing is I feel like a lot of this happened before, but just under our nose and in the darkness, and to a lot of wonderful people, a lot of our immigrant brothers and sisters, just our brothers and sisters in general. But I think this happened, it supposedly, it really happened heavily, not supposedly, it really did. Obama was the deporter in chief, as they called him. But now we're seeing it, and hopefully now that we're seeing this ugliness even more in our face, we're seeing families torn apart. I really hope we will vote and change laws that have more compassionate towards people who are coming into our country. Because we are, this is not a good look for us, and it's always horrible to treat people bad. But that's what you're going to get with that's what you're getting with the government right now. And I hope we'll speak out and be loud and take chances and organize more. I've been talking to some folks, pastors across the country, and figuring out how we can get more organized. I was even thinking about calling all the emergent people and saying, listen, let's just get together and organize a protest, just as an emergent reunion of we can call it an emergency reunion for people. I think would be nice. Yeah, I just had to say all that stuff because I had to get it out. I had to get it out because it's frustrating to watch so many people's lives being torn apart. It's horrible to watch all these wars. It's horrible just to turn on the TV, much less anything else. So Instagram and all that crap. But listen, we're going to go into something today, and I'll tell you how this talk came about. It's very interesting. Good morning, by the way, everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe. So I kept seeing clips, different clips. Just completely different people on Instagram, because I spend way too much time on social media, as a lot of us do. But I kept seeing people talk about very similar things, and in different interviews, and like from all different walks of life. And it kind of the concept of how in every subculture, often in every subculture, probably every culture, but every subculture, basically how we can become petty and hurtful towards one another. And I kept seeing these clips. I'm going to just share some of them with you. I'm not going to share the actual clips. I put those up on my Instagram. You could go watch them right now if you want. I think they're like not the last four, but they're in there near the end. That came up during the week. And I kept seeing this kind of a consistent thing, and I was like, "This is good," because in some ways it was saying it feels like there's a shift is happening. It's something that I feel like I've beaten a dead horse on, but it felt like a shift was happening because I saw so many people speaking about it in not just religious settings and in very diverse settings. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Also, one of the things that we're focused on, and I'm focused on, and I know that the whole staff of Revolution, which is my friend Brian Yarborough, who is the volunteer staff now. You guys have probably met him and seen him. He took me to Las Vegas to the Punk Rock Museum, and he really believes in revolution, and I'm grateful for him. But we all believe that it's time for a reformation in the church. And as you look and see, oh, there's 5 of us here right now while I'm watching the live stream. So many of us that reform the church. But the time is now, and I think the time is right. And so guess what? Hi, Linda and Chuck. How are you guys doing? Love you guys. Welcome, welcome. Well, I'll tell you why. We gotta have a reformation. We're gonna start talking about it, and I don't want to talk about it in a way that it's like we need a reformation. You know, Phyllis Tickle talked about it and said that this would be around the time that it would happen again. About every 500 years, we have one. And I think she felt that it might be the emergent church. And of course, the emergent church became more of a movement. We moved and moved and moved, and then it's just stopped and kind of imploded a little bit. So my thing is, we're going to have a reformation. We're starting a reformation. I am just going to say this is time for reformation, and this is going to be part of it. And part of it is looking on the insides of the churches and realizing some of the house cleaning tips, the housekeeping tips that we need to look at and repeat, and things we need to look at with each other and be careful of. And I think that's what we're going to do today. So I want to start out with a quote from. I have not read the book, and everybody tells me to read the book. I've seen the movie, and the movie's always better than the book. I'm just kidding. But East of Eden, which I watched East of Eden like as a teenager. Like my saint was James Dean. So I couldn't really get into Giant because it was such a big film. I could probably watch it now. But I watched Rebel Without a Cause and East of Eden. Like I had them on, my mom bought them for me on VHS, and I just played those movies over and over again. I just loved those movies. But there's a quote from East of Eden. And it goes, it says, and now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. And now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. And to me, that's like the concept of grace. That was when I really got grace. Is like, I thought I had to have everything together. And then all of a sudden I understood grace and realized, oh, I don't have to be perfect. And so now that I'm not perfect, I can be good. I can actually live my life. There's some things I can do to make my life better. So what I added to this though for today is, so here's the quote from is it Steinbeck? Beck, and now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. But listen, I put a little asterisk here and I wrote, and I hate asterisks with grace, but I did one. And not expect others to be perfect either. And I think that's often the problem when we get grace, when we come to some sort of realization, when we change from one tribe to another tribe or things like this. And so this is what I was noticing with some of these clips of different pastors and speakers and even just anarchists. All these different folks these clips I saw from all different walks of life. So I started noticing all these different things, but these people were all saying very similar things. That sometimes we get grace for you, or grace for the few, and rigid grace for everyone else. Like this concept of grace plus. I talked about it in one of my books. This idea of like, well, you get grace, but you need to do this, 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 and you got to do this, And you look at and you see that when this doesn't work, because you often see this stuff come from liberals or very progressive people. When you think of this, is things like cancel culture, gossip, or legalism for your adversaries. Like you're only you have legalism, like you're free from legalism, except when it comes to your adversaries. Like, oh, I only judge the judgmental. I saw something today that was like no tolerance for the intolerant. And that's a very like leftist kind of anarchist thing that I see lately, like no tolerance for the intolerant. But see, I'm nonviolent, and I also am a Christian, and so I believe that I want to see tolerance for the intolerant, because my thing is I want to win them over. I want to convert them to tolerance. I want to help give them new information and more information to live by. Because if you really want to start a movement, if you really want to start something like a Reformation, if you really want to make something happen, it's not telling people it's too late, or that we've got to cancel them because they don't think the way we do, or God forbid that we have to commit violence or murder against them because they are not like us or do not think like us, or they are intolerant because we are so tolerant. And if you want to find out how tolerant you truly are, try just loving people in general. And what happens is what I found is with a lot of these folks who kind of practice intolerance against the intolerant, eventually they run out of the intolerance for other people, and then they start to pick each other apart. It's like people who are like the punk rock police, or the people the punk rock police, or the hip hop police, or the whatever, we have scene police, the goth, whatever, all these different scenes as we had as young people. Everybody's kind of like these guardians of the scene. Even when I went to Punk Rock Museum, I was like, I don't know about this. Is it going to be a bunch of 90s like punk rock crap, And, of course I was wrong. It was awesome. The Punk Rock Museum was awesome. But, we go into these things where we start to think, well, I know what it really means. And if you don't follow my idea of what it is, you're out. And so we get so close we become intolerant of the intolerant, and then we start becoming intolerant of other people. I remember one time, there's this guy who writes these fascinating comics. I see a lot of you guys share them, honestly. And it's always giving a hard time to the church needs to be better. And usually they're like dead on, right on the nose. But I remember when he was kind of with this one group that was very intolerant of intolerant people, and they put a target on the emergent church near the end, when we were just kind of, everything was kind of just fading away. And this guy started making comics about the emergent church as though we were something bad, or, and I'm going like, here we all are in this emergent church, all trying to be inclusive and loving and graceful, but now because you disagree with a few people in the emergent church, you put a whole target on the whole movement's back. And and this judgment went a little further than just a comic, but still, it was just these ideas is that you see these really loving, graceful, tolerant people that they say, oh, we're so great. But then they end up attacking one another. They end up eating their own. As my mom used to say, the church is the only army that kills its wounded. But I'm finding out that it's not just the church. I think it's a lot of cultures, a lot of tribes, a lot of subcultures. Liberals and progressives are really good at it, I think conservatives are better at making movements because they just let you join. Like they're like, we can get you, we can make you think more like us over time. Just get in here, buddy. But leftists are like, and we can be really just jerks. I was able to see it in an interesting way growing up as a kid, because when my parents had their scandal, I saw it from the right, I saw it from the left, I saw it from the I mean, everybody was just like, those just did not like my family, and really scapegoated the hell out of them, And I think about my dad's affair was like, he was with this woman for 15 minutes. He's told me the ins and outs of everything that happened at this tryst. And I know more than I should about my own father's sex life. But those few minutes just null and voided every good thing he tried to do for people, and now he's kind of not even the man he used to be. But it's those things is that we find one or two little things and we tear each other apart. And if we want a reformation, if we want a movement, if we really want a movement that's going to reform things and change things, we cannot do this to one another anymore. We are going to have to learn to be tolerant. And where do we find this tolerance? Well, luckily, I know a book. It's called the Bible. Believe it or not, you would think that's not a very tolerant book. But when it talks about love, when it talks about grace, it is very inclusive. When it talks about judgment, And we're going to look at a couple of those today. So let's and then we've got inclusion saint over here, Mr. Martin Luther King, who was not perfect. He was a Baptist minister and struggled with women in leadership and things like that. He needed to grow some on that. So no one's going to be perfect. You're always going to find something wrong with someone. People have different thoughts and different opinions and different ideas, different convictions and different experiences, believe it or not. And, sometimes when I'm arguing when me and Pete have argued before, he's like, people think different. He gets real sarcastic with me. We can get a little edgy when we disagree. But, he's right. It's like we all I can't believe not everyone's marching in line with me. So funny thing is, as I was mentioning that comic thing, is later on, these people, this group that I don't even want to mention, here's a group of like progressive Christians, and I don't even want to mention their name because I'm frightened of them because they were so destructive. But they hurt a really good friend of mine, Tony Jones, and pretty much destroyed his life, and then found out later that it was wrong. And I don't think anybody ever apologized or anything. I think they just kind of moved on and was like, oops, we canceled somebody and screwed up their life. I mean, he just got canceled from an event like 6 months ago because of all this old stuff that's just still on the internet that no one's taken down and no one's corrected. And then these people turned on to that. Then that comic guy got turned on by these people. We all, we eat each other. We destroy each other and we eat each other. And this group really started out well because they were kind of like really after Mark Driscoll. And, but the funny thing is what you realize is that intolerance just has to continue to be fed. It's much like legalism, it's never satisfied. It's never satisfied with works. It's never enough. It never says enough. Legalism never says enough. And intolerance never says enough. It has this bottomless appetite of what it does, and it comes and kills, steals, and destroys. It takes away peace, it takes away serenity, and it really, really hurts people's lives. And that's why we've got to make sure, if we're going to go into group as Reformation, reform the church, change the church, that we're not doing this to each other, because we'll just end up with 500 more denominations. Can you hear me? Is this thing on? Tap, tap. If you like what I'm saying, like and subscribe. My 10-year-old reminds me to, well, he's going to be 10 next in August. He keeps reminding me. My 9-year-old keeps reminding me to tell people to like and subscribe. But I'm glad to kind of see that it's not just a church thing. So let me share. I wrote my notes really crazy for this, so my notes are all over the place, which isn't great for me. But I'm going to share some of the things I saw. One of the first things I saw was a friend of mine, Dan Cook. He's got a show called You Have Permission. It's a podcast. He's like a therapist, and he's a really nice guy. We had lunch together once. He had a guy on called John Steingard, I think, Steingard, and he was talking about Josh Harris. I don't know if you guys remember Josh Harris. I've talked a little bit about him here because when he first came out and said, I kissed the book, he wrote that book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye. When he denounced it and said, I was wrong, I messed up, I made a mistake, which, just for the record, I said that when the book came out. But but he came out and said, I was wrong, I made a mistake, please forgive me. And people were like, it's too late, it's too late. And that's already, I was saying, we can't say it's too late. You don't build a movement. When people change their mind and come to your side of thinking, you don't say, oh, it's too late, you can't. I mean, what does that do? It discourages anybody to think differently. It discourages people to have hard conversations. It discourages people to give the other side the benefit of the doubt when it's like we're ruling just as bad as the church. So often we change, like evangelicals often just go from like, I'm leaving the evangelical church because they're so judgmental and awful and mean. And then we're like, I'm going to the progressive church and we can be judgmental and mean in a much different way. It's like we hold on to that legalism. That legalism stays with us. But he had this thing and he got in trouble, this guy, John, because he spoke out, because I guess Josh Harris was trying to put together some deconstruction event and charging money for it. And everybody, I guess, was waiting for him to do something dumb. And I guess this was something he was charging too much money for it or something. I don't know exactly the details. But there was such a glee people got in taking him down. Like they were just waiting for the next mistake. And I don't know if this is that progressive Christians don't read enough of the Apostle Paul because they got hung up on the pastoral epistles, or they never wrote Romans. They didn't read Romans 2. They don't know good scholarship. I don't know, but I do think it's not enough Paul in their diet, not enough grace in their diet. Oh, I'm just a Jesus person, and they're like, don't know how good Paul is about grace, talking about grace, and that Paul's actually closer to the life of Jesus and is probably giving us a lot of what Jesus said clearly, or clearer than some of the Gospels. But people just had a glee. I remember there was this T-shirt at Cornerstone, and I meant to call one of my friends from back in the day about it. But there's this T-shirt that said, your sheep has such sharp teeth," and it had two sheep with fangs. And Matt DeBenedictis and me would always like try to figure out what these T-shirts meant, because sometimes these T-shirts were just you're like, because it was so inside baseball that sometimes it was more inside than we just didn't know what it was. Does that mean that like Christians are assholes, or does that mean we should be assholes? I mean, one time me and Matt, some poor guy, he had this shirt that said, "I'm in love with a man," with the rainbow on it, and on the back it said it's Jesus, and we were like, dude, this is like, are you anti-gay? What are you trying? Me and Matt Benedict just really questioned this guy and at his T-shirt booth at Cornerstone in Florida. But there was one that's like, "Your teeth are so sharp," and now looking back, it had two sheep, and it's kind of brilliant because you could just be like, yeah, I mean, it's like both sides just have fangs, and we're not supposed to have fangs. We're not supposed to be like that. We're not supposed to be constantly biting and devouring one another. I mean, we just went through Galatians, and that's the whole point of Galatians. Galatians 5:15, instead of loving one another, beware of biting and devouring and being consumed by one another. And this is not to say we don't speak truth to power. We don't speak truth to ignorance. Of course we do. But we have to be careful on how we do it. We have to be careful of what parts of that it sparks in us. And we have to make sure that we're not, that's not the point. I think when it's the point and we get this like our brain chemicals get these things, we get to a point where we just become so destructive that we just start to destroy one another. That we don't become these gatekeepers, and that we make room for people's faults. I mean, of course we speak truth to power. But what I'm talking about is like inner community fighting, inner tribal fighting, turning on one another, is really what the talk is for today. You don't want people to feel like there's dangers in finding the truth, But anyway, so this guy, John Steingard, who's a filmmaker, I believe, said, listen, he stood up for this guy online, and he said he got slaughtered online for saying like, hey, you guys, you got to stop. Like, you're getting too much joy out of attacking these people, and people will get you. I remember one time these people were attacking this pastor's family, and I chimed in, and it was like one person was a therapist, or all these people. This was years and years ago. And I chimed in and go, hey, I can give you kind of a different look on this, being a pastor's kid whose family went through something like that. And they're like, you're not helping. You need to leave, And so all of a sudden these inclusive communities become exclusive because you don't fit their narrative. You don't fit black and white thinking. And sometimes we do that. Another thing I saw was by this guy, Reverend Benjamin Creamer. I don't know if you guys follow him on Instagram. He's very good. He says a lot of great stuff. But he said, I saw this thing too, and this is another thing that made me want to talk about this today. He goes, he was doing a newsletter on replacing extreme binary thinking with extreme binary thinking. You hear me? Like, don't replace extreme binary thinking with extreme binary thinking. Like, don't go like, okay, I'm on this side of the binary. Now when I move over to this side of the binary, I'm still going to have extreme binary thinking. It's still going to be us and them, in and out. That's going to be the whole thing. I looked at the letter that he wrote because it came out this morning. It was a little bit more about Palestine, which is my heart is there, but and I thought it was great. But still, this idea that we do this so often is, people say, well, I don't think people often leave the church because, there's some people who leave the church who are just like, oh, these miracles and stuff, I don't get it, and those folks, I'm like, hey, I get it, if you can't grab that, that's cool. But there's some people who leave the church because they were abused by the church and because they were hurt by the church and they were so beat up by the church. And so they leave the evangelical church or the traditional church and they become progressive Christians. And unfortunately, what happens too often is they just keep that zeal and that anger. And the very reason they left the other church, they still have those in themselves. So they just return the favor. It's that Nietzsche quote, those who fight monsters must be careful not to become monsters themselves. So we end up just trading, we just keep the dogma, or we keep all this stuff and we go over and, so we're like, we keep the anger, we keep the legalism, we keep the, we're the guardian thing, that we're guardians of the gates, who's really Christian, who's really punk rock, who's really good, who's really cool, who's really liberal, who's really progressive. And you see this a lot. But I liked that I follow him quite a bit. I post some of his stuff a lot because I think this Reverend Benjamin Creamer is really good. But replacing extreme binary thinking with extreme binary thinking seems to be something that we do over and over again as Christians. I think it's really strongly big in the church for Christians to do. I think it happens outside of the church. And I have some examples of that today as well. But it's something that's very, very, that really haunts the church, really hurts the church, I believe. I mean, I watched progressives come after. I mean, one of the reasons the emergent church folded is because progressive Christians who were more like mainliners and stuff came after the emergent church, which the emergent church was all these progressive people who were like, well, we don't know all the answers and we don't have certainty, we don't think the book's magical, and it was a lot of them was ex-evangelicals who were just experiencing this. But then you had these gatekeepers come in and go, well, you don't have enough women, or you're all too many white men, or there's too many this. And we weren't a denomination. We were just groups of people trying to meet together. One of the weird things is one of the first emergent events I really went to that was official was all women speakers, So everything I would hear about emergent church wasn't necessarily true, but there was all this stuff. And then a lot of the emergent people got afraid because they're like, oh, these people are my supporters, or these people are also in my tribe, and they're saying the emergent church is bad. And rather than arguing well or disagreeing well, we just closed up shop. It was very sad. It was very sad because you don't see movements happen like that very often. And the fact that it kind of really ate itself, it was just like, oh, there's not enough room at the table for more than one progressive church or one group, or you guys are all getting book deals. I mean, I feel like a lot of it had to do with jealousy more than anything. But there was a few people who came in and grasped onto rumors and really put the death nail into that work. And that's just, it's too bad. It's really too bad. And so I've seen it firsthand destroy those people's lives. When I growing up, I saw the right and the left scapegoat my parents and family for a few little things, or big things you might say even, but they throw you away. And this is not how it can be. This will not lead us to Reformation. This will just lead us to continue to repeat a cycle. That's why I don't support violence. That's why I think when we continue to do these wars and we continue to hurt people, violence doesn't stop violence. Violence just creates more violence. It's a never-ending cycle. We often foster division in our communities and tribes. And how do we not do that? I was watching another podcast, a podcast I had been on actually once, one of my favorite podcasts is with this guy, Jason Miles, who's just freaking awesome. And he runs this podcast called This is Revolution Oakland. We're not connected, but maybe we'll do a double revolution talk one day. I'm going to have him here and talk to you guys. Not a religious guy, but he's a really cool guy. I mean, he grew up in religion, but I don't think he's religious anymore. He had interviewed someone named Clementine Morgan, and you might be familiar with her. She has a podcast called Fucking Canceled. That's right. I did not say that. That's what it's called. Don't blame me. I'm just telling you what it's called. And it's a socialist podcast. And this is another clip that I saw this week that made me think of this, is why it was important to talk about this today. Is she was talking about how she was pretty much canceled by the anarchist, like in the anarchist community and in the socialist community. I didn't even know what it was for, but she told stories about like people coming up, like they had a socialist meetup thing and somebody came up like an anarchist covered in black and poured coffee all over these zines that she had made, because they want to hold on to that cancel culture. And again, that's not how you grow a movement. I might sound like a broken record, but I have to be a broken record because these are things that we have to hear over and over again. It reminds me when Martin Luther said the message of justification in his commentary on Galatians. The message of justification cannot be repeated enough, for it is not by our nature to hold on to such an idea. So we must repeat it over and over again. But she was talking about how she was canceled and what that was like, and how people don't just do this with movie stars and celebrities, but often do this in communities. And basically steal, when they do this, they kick people out of communities, and all of a sudden these people have no friends. Often their businesses are based or their work's based within that community. They lose their work, they lose that. I saw that happen with my friend Tony Jones. When he got canceled for something that wasn't true by a group of well-intended, progressive, edgy Christians, which I really hope one day those folks will apologize and those folks will take down that shit, or at least put something up that they were wrong, because this shouldn't have to follow this person around. He shouldn't have to deal with this for the rest of his life. He copes. He's strong dude, but for me personally, I think I'm really disappointed with how the church reacts to this kind of stuff. He was going to speak at this really mainline denomination, big church, and I actually called him because I was so upset at the church, and they canceled him from speaking because there was these things online. I said, well, it's not true, that, and I know that. Yeah, but there wasn't this and this, and everybody, we don't want the people to have to worry about it. And it was a pastor's call. I'm like, this is what you're teaching your pastors? You're like one of the biggest denominations in the world, and you're teaching your pastors that if they see something that makes them uncomfortable online, even when it's not true, that you'll just cancel the person and throw them out anyway, because you don't want confusion or gossip, or you don't want somebody to feel uncomfortable. That's not Christianity. That might be some people's lives, and that's fine. But if you're following Christ and you're calling yourself pastors and ministers, that's not the church. And that's why, again, I call on reform in the church now. Because if we keep doing that and destroying people's lives and allowing lives to be destroyed over rumors and allegations that are not true, we're no better than anybody else. We're not going to change anything if we're going to be that petty with each one of their lives, and we can't act like act like human beings who can handle questions or friction or thing like that. It really bothers me. I wonder why. I was thinking about how people used to warn me that grace was a slippery slope. And, once you start going into grace. And so I would hear things like early on, oh, Jay, you preach too much grace. Or, if you don't, what about repentance? And what about that? And well, repentance is just change your mind. I had most of my answers down. And they'd be like, it's a slippery slope. But they meant like a slippery slope to hell. But it's not just what you think. Because grace can be a slippery slope, and it was for me in the beginning this way as well, is where you have no grace for the graceless. Like, you get grace, I accept grace, but those who do not show grace do not get grace, which makes no sense, because had I not understood grace when I didn't quite understand it, had someone not told me about it and explained it to me, I would not be doing my life's work. But someone was like, you're making Christ's death in vain. You're doing all this stuff. And I was like, okay, prove it to me. And they did. D.E. Polk is the man who did it. And I've been talking about grace ever since. I've been that one trick pony ever since, that one tune, of grace. But grace can get you into this idea of that all of a sudden, well, you've got grace. And so people who get grace are cool, but graceless people are the enemy. And I think that's what's so vital about bringing nonviolence into church's ideas and into this movement, is that one of the things nonviolence says is that people aren't the enemy, it's the misinformation. We don't look to destroy people or to tear people apart. So often when you get into this, like, oh, I'm cool, I love, my LGBTQ friends, I do all this stuff, all the stuff I was an earlier adapter to, very early adapter to. But then all of a sudden you're like, we got to destroy these anti, folks. We got to destroy. Jerry Falwell died, but it's like we got to destroy Driscoll's. We got to destroy this, and then all of a sudden you start to want to, And then here, the wild thing about my friend Tony Jones was he was one of the first, like, evangelical leaders that I knew was a fully affirming, LGBTQ affirming, and in the emergent church, who spoke out against it. Me and him were very early in on there, and he still got thrown under the bus. Because people bought into gossip stuff they didn't know about. They just took other people's words and they did a telephone game, and that was very much on. I do have to say, but seeing these clips come up on all different types of all these different shows that aren't connected at all gives me hope that maybe we've learned that cancel culture and this type of idea does not work. And maybe we're learning our lessons that this is a very toxic thing for any movement that wants to create actual change in the world. And so what you have to do is not see those people as people to be destroyed, but people saying they're spewing misinformation, and we have to speak against that. But real love, real grace is, and nonviolence is when you have the chance to destroy your enemy, you don't. You don't destroy the person. It's the message. I can sit down with some of these really arrogant, nationalist Christians, and I can have a conversation with them. I can debate them all day. And that's what we want to do. I think that's why people like Dan McClellan is so important, helping people understand biblical scholarship and things like that. So we have more tools in our toolbox to have these disagreements and to have these arguments and point out, like, no, that's what you're saying. It has nothing to do with faith or Christianity. It just makes no sense. The reason I had this woman rebuke demons out of me just a few weeks ago was because I was making sense. Because I was saying, well, what about this? Because she wanted to go Bible. So I said, well, what about this story in the Bible? Or what about when Jesus says this? Or what about, so she had no defense except to rebuke me in the name of Jesus. So we have to be careful that grace does not become a slippery slope to no grace at all, or that we're not, as Reverend Creamer said, we're not replacing extreme binary thinking with extreme binary thinking. And I think it's important to realize, like, when you think of somebody being an anarchist and getting canceled in anarchy in an anarchist group, I mean, it seems pretty wild, right? Grace will often give you a new enemy, or at least think it is a new enemy, especially if you identify as a side or a tribe or progressive. And so we might need to rethink or redefine the meaning of these words, tribal, progressive, grace, and what that means. We got, I'm always saying, that's why I have that grace is anarchy. I mean, that's the whole point, is like, it's for everybody. It's for people like Jerry Falwell's and things like that. It's anarchy, folks. This is what allows us to be able to, that's what that quote I read from East of Eden. And now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. But unfortunately, we know we don't have to be perfect. Being good now, we are holding other people to perfection standards, or even to good standards, but we don't realize that maybe they don't have the information and the knowledge that we have received. I know it's harder. It's a lot harder than just saying, like, well, let's just cancel them and put some sassy hashtag below their name. And yes, some folks do need to be confronted. But there's ways to do that. I mean, the Bible talks about it, like when you're going to somebody to confront somebody, you confront them personally one-on-one first. I mean, I don't know any of these folks who ever did that. Then you go with some other folks, friends, and then you go with some leadership. And then after that, you can start going, crazy about it. But public in biblical days wasn't like public now. Public then was like, I've told the whole church of 10 what's happening. And now it's like, I'm telling millions of people. But when your faith and the main focus of your faith is exposing and tearing down your enemies, you better be right. You better have it together. But I would say if that's the whole focus of your following a faith in a tradition that's based on forgiveness and grace and reconciliation and restoration, your focus is off if that's what your faith is about extreme binaries. If it's all black and white thinking. We end up fighting people rather than the powers and the issues at hand. We end up destroying lives. If you're in a situation where you see something and that you're worried about it and you're saying, make sure you have all the information. That was one of the things with my friend Tony, is that a lot of us who said, hey, no, this isn't true. We know the situation. We know what's going on, and do things like, oh, well, you're a white male Christian. Oh, too many. I mean, literally the church when I called them, they was like, well, there's just too many men defended him. I'm like, what? But they're like, one was Brian McLaren. I mean, Brian McLaren's like so solid, and I can tell you what happened with some of the other people that were more worried about their careers than they were Tony, and that's why some of the other people didn't speak up. And it's a shame. It's a real shame that mainline denomination. I'm like, well, they have the court tapes. The court transcriptions of everything. You can read those. There's some people have read those and written things about it. Oh, well, we don't want to go that far. So when we don't even know how to practice forgiveness, reconciliation, or restoration, how would we ever have a reformation happen? How could we ever really be the body of Christ? How can we ever really call ourselves a church if we don't know the very basics? We so often forget the last thing that Jesus says on the cross. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. That's a big one. And I'm surprised more people don't talk about that. We've got to have justice and accountability, but when we're turning on each other and we're putting impossible expectations on each other, and when we're just tearing each other apart, it just gets us nowhere fast. I don't know if you guys know who Kristen Smith is. He's a pastor as well, and he's been dropping some really, really good stuff lately. And he talked about this as well, and this was another reason I wanted to speak to you. So you've got this, probably non-Christian, socialist, anarchist podcast, people talking about this happening in their own community. You've got Reverend Benjamin Creamer, who's a pretty big preacher, talking about this. You've got Dan Cook talking to this filmmaker about this very same thing of what's happening within the church. And then you've got Kristen Smith, who's a black pastor and a part of a community that I really love. And we've crossed paths a few times. He's friends with my friend D.E. And he's also was friends with Carlton Pearson. But he says, often when we abandon evangelicalism, we convert, when we convert, but then we start to condemn or, look down on others and fighting people that don't think like us. So we convert, we condemn, or we look down on others. We want to cancel them. And so he was saying, too often we've taken this kind of evangelical concept of winning souls and winning people and saying, you've got to change, you've got to be a better Christian, you've got to be, and we convert out of that. And then we go and look at the other side, and we're sitting there and we're doing the same thing they did to us. We're condemning them, we're looking down on them, we're judging them, we're fighting them. And we don't accept and include people who think like us. And that's usually the very reason we left the conservative evangelicalism, because we thought there's too many outsiders. And they think, well, as long as everybody else is an insider, we can scapegoat. It's called scapegoating, because not everybody's like that. And Christian Smith said one of the most powerful things. He has this really great quote, and he goes, "It's one thing to get out of the church. It's another to get the church out of you." So it's one thing for us to get out of the church, but it's a whole nother thing to get the church out of us. The legalism, all that. I mean, even when I was sober, and most of my staff drank and all this stuff, and we'd always go to the bars. And I remember secretly in my mind thinking, like, yeah, I don't drink, so no one can judge me. You know what I mean? Rather than thinking like, you shouldn't judge these folks. This is ridiculous. I just thought, oh, I'm taken care of, because it's really hard to get that church out of you, that legalism out of you. And so often when we just change tribes or we change communities, we still have that church attitude of the sheep with sharp fangs that just like, okay, now you're the enemy. Now I'm going to treat you like the way you were treating these people. And it just recycles. It recycles. You've got that. And then it usually ends up biting everybody in the ass, because then you find people in your own community who don't line up, or maybe they voted for somebody different, or they didn't vote for the person you thought they were supposed to. And so now they're out, and now they're bad. And it just continues to dwindle down until there's not many left of you righteous folks. Right? And so I put links to, I put these in my stories, all these different ones, all these different talks on my Instagram stories, and I put a couple on the Revolution Instagram stories as well. So please follow those folks, check them out, check out what I'm sharing with you. But I hope this makes sense. We've got to stop doing this to each other. We've got to stop spreading rumors with one another. We got to stop tearing each other apart. We got to stop all this inner judgment. And if we want to see a reformation. And I'm going to say the same thing with left-leaning progressives. We got to do this. We can't have cancel culture. We've got to have a culture that is focused on restoring and building a great movement and helping people understand the work we're trying to do. Like you want people to understand why folks should get affordable health care. You want to help people understand why people should be able to pay their rent, why people should be able to have a living wage, why children should be given 3 meals a day no matter what. You want to help people understand that. And they'll have defenses, and they'll say, well, the church is supposed to do that. And Reverend Creamer just did a thing on that was really good. I posted some of that up on the Revolution Instagram messages, stories. He just did something really good about that. So, but there's always this concept of like, fuck them. Let's just tear them apart. I one time spoke about my friend Tony and this other person who was attacking Tony, the person who headed up this website, and mentioned them. I said, I just wish these two would start arguing with each other. I have never pulled down a sermon in my life except for that one. I pulled it down because the people from that website that attacked my friend Tony all of a sudden attacked my Facebook page and just saying all this horrible stuff and all these horrible things. And I was like, I couldn't handle it. It was also triggering to me all the friendly fire and all the, just the viciousness of people who share your same belief system. And even though they know something they don't know, they've just decided that someone's guilty, and they have this binary way of thinking in their mind, and they bought into like this, hashtag movements, and they just decided what they were going to do. So they just kill, steal, and destroy. So I took I was tired. The name of the title was Tired. I had a skateboard that said Tired. And these people got so angry at me. That's why I'm not mentioning them by name right now. I don't even know if they really exist anymore, but for God forbid they do, And that's a sad place to be. And so I don't know. I just wanted to I got these verses I'm going to share with you real quick, and then we'll call it a day, okay? And I think these are some verses that kind of encourage us to live in this way. Matthew 7. Matthew 7, 1 through 6. It says, this is what the Bible says about judging. I can't even believe that, that I'm still having this conversation about begging people not to bite and devour one another, even in the more liberal progressive churches and mainline denominations. I mean, it breaks my heart that this is why we got to get this, because if we really want to reform the church, if we really want to see a reformation happen, we got to grasp this stuff, folks. We got to grasp it. It's so vital that we grasp it. Do not judge so that you may not be judged. For with the judgment you make, you will judge, and the measure you will give will be the measure you get. And I see this so often when these groups turn against each other, when these, and there's somebody becomes an odd man out, or when someone new who was, Josh Harris, who was came in and said, I want to join, and they try to be a part of it and they do something wrong and we just tear them apart. But eventually it happens to the next person. Eventually somebody might get a book deal, or something happens, or they compromise something, or you find out they didn't think the way they were supposed to, or they thought a certain comedian was funny that's not PC enough or not acceptable, and I'm just speaking from experience, and people just lose their minds, because they don't for me, I like John Lydon, but I saw an interview with John Lydon and I could not disagree more with him on his stance on Israel. Could not disagree more with him. But guess what? I didn't take down my Sex Pistols and PIL stuff, and I didn't burn my albums or delete them off my phone. And there's things about him that encourage me and I can learn and grow, and there's things I don't. And maybe if I ever get to sit down with the man, I can have the conversation with him, And that's a tough part of life. But it's an important part of life. There's sometimes we disagree even on very vital things, because there's a lot of other things that we agree on, and that maybe those things we can agree on can come together and help that one point change, those ideas change. But you'll never know if you don't try. If you just escape somebody, then they're done. Why do you see a speck in your neighbor's eye, but you do not take the log out of your own eye? And that's so true, because we're always so focused on everybody else's shit and tearing everybody else apart, and we don't know how broken we are. I had somebody years ago, a progressive person, accusing me of living in a bad neighborhood to be because I was trying to show off, I was trying to be virtue signal. I'm I'm not here because I'm rich. I'm here because I can't afford to live anywhere else. I didn't I just go move into poor neighborhoods and help them out. That would be great if I was that kind of rich guy. I could do that, but I was not. I was there because I had to be. And now sometimes I don't get, I haven't paid my rent on time in a couple months. It's freaky deaky, and so anyhow. But people create an idea and these things in their head, and they just create an image of how it is, because we keep to allow these judgments. I mean, when you start saying all people, all this group or all that group, you've become a judgmental bastard. You've moved outside of grace. You've become a type of person who judges people based on identity politics. It's a type of racism, really. I mean, it's a type of saying well, all those people are bad because of this, or all those people are bad because of that, And it's, oh, you're not really working class. I spent last week digging ditches for my work, literally digging ditches. But anyhow, I digress. Or how can you say to your neighbor, let me take the speck out of your eye while the log is in your own eye? You hypocrites, first take out the log in your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. Work on ourselves. We've got to work on ourselves, loving others, caring about others. So next time you just think you're going to jump on the train to help cancel somebody, or there's somebody in your community who's done something really awful, think if everything you did was on public. Think about it every time you lost your temper. I mean, I had this issue when I flew on a plane recently, and I was putting my bag up, but somebody put a jacket, literally soft little tiny. I said, hey, can you put this on top of your thing? I need to put my suit. I want my jacket there. So we started fighting, and we were nose to nose. And we had to sit next to each other the whole time. Finally, I apologized because I was so embarrassed. I'm like, what would have happened if someone would have just been sitting there with a camera watching me nose to nose argue with this guy about a suitcase and a jacket? So we often need to look at our own selves. And you know, I used to see this verse as very different, and 6 is not part of 7:1 through 6. I mean 7:1 through 5. I never thought were the same as this as verse 6 here. But it says, "Do not give what is holy to the dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them under the foot and turn and maul you." And I think this is the same thing. It's like you've got to be careful of how we judge each other, because how we judge it, they will judge each other. And then this whole idea of pouring pearls to swine is, I think there's this concept of us going like, you know, sharing our freedom and forgiveness. Like this person who does the doc, you know, has this thing called fucking canceled, a podcast called that, you know, and then they get stuff poured on them. You know, it's often just like, it's hard to be honest with people because people are going to attack you. People are going to go after you. People are going to find ways to tear you apart, even with things you hold precious. And I've seen so many lives lost because people shared something intimate with them or tried something new, and then people trampled them. And so I think there's something close here to this idea of don't judge each other. And it's saying, like, when you do go through this and you throw your pearls to these people who you know are going to judge you and tear you apart, if you're not careful, you're going to end up dead too. So it's kind of like this constant warning of how we treat each other and how much we're able to put out with each other, because we may be trampled by one another and torn up by one another, because that's just the nature of life. And I'm going to jump over it real quick to, I got to pick up my kids, so I'm not going to keep you guys too much longer. Luke 7, actually Luke 6. And it says, now listen to this. I wasn't going to read this part. I was just going to read Luke 6:37, but I feel like 32 has something to say to us as well. If you love those who love you, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive with credit, is that to you? For even if sinners, if you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. Like, so if you give out loans and expect to be repaid back, I mean, come on, folks, that's a pretty harsh one, right? But love your enemies, do good to those, lend expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great and high in the children of the Most High. For he is the kind to the ungrateful and to the wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. And he's saying, like, Jesus saying, God is kind to the wicked and unwicked. Be merciful just as your Father. Loan to those who can't repay you. Love those who don't love you. Because if not, what different? Why follow Christianity? Why say I'm following Christianity? I'm following Jesus if you're just going to be like, well, I just hang out with people in my own tribe. You know? And then when they act up, I don't love them anymore. You know what I mean? It's the same, like, if you really want to be compassionate as God is merciful, if you want to be merciful as your Father is merciful, then you do good things to people who don't do good things to you. Hello, it's right there. There it is, folks. You can't just say Paul says it all. Goes into 37, which was the point of today, I guess. Is do not judge and you will not be judged. Do not condemn and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. Give it and it will be given to you. In good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will put into your lap, for the measure you give will be the measure you get back. And that is not for fundraising. I really wish it was, because I would use that to get you guys to donate and say, yo, don't you want your barns to overflow if you give money? It is about giving forgiveness. It is about showing grace. It is about showing mercy. Do not judge and you will not be judged. So if you're a part of a community that's real cool, real liberal, real woke, real hip to everybody, but you see them constantly judging and going after other people, I think we could go back to the pearl of swine thing. Be careful, because you might be the one who's next on the hit list. Someone might come and accuse you of something that's true or not true, and you might be done for. I mean, I can't even mention certain communities anymore, Christian communities, without thinking like, I don't know if I can handle it. I'm working already, almost working 3 other jobs besides this one. I don't think I can add any more work. You know, there's no asterisk here. So that's what it's calling us to, is to be different, to think different. If we want to see a reformation, we have to learn to love those who don't love us, to be able to disagree with those who disagree with us, and still treat them like human beings and not less than, and not defeat them and not going to destroy them, but hopefully maybe change their minds, have good conversations, win them over to friendship rather than destruction, because otherwise we're just no different. We're just going, we just got, the only difference between us is that we have a rainbow flag behind our cross, So, well, we include these folks, but we don't include those. And we're called, love's a higher law. Remember, Bono said that? So we're really called to love people to the fullest extent. And we're really called to do this. So let's not, as Reverend Benjamin Creamer said, let's not replace extreme binary thinking with extreme binary thinking. Remember, as Kristen Smith said, it's one thing to get out of the church. It's another thing to get the church out of you. So I hope you folks will take that with you today. And think about that when how you treat each other. And I'll even give you this little bit of message here is maybe you'll speak up when you see it happening to others. Maybe you'll say, hey, this isn't fair. Or, hey, this isn't how we get ahead. Maybe you'll be the voice of reason that comes in and says, we're going to destroy each other if we don't stop treating each other this way. And, you may say that to me one day, because I don't have it nailed down perfect. As I always try to say, it's progress, not perfection. And we have to learn from each other. So there you go. Sorry, this talk was a little bit all over the place today, but my notes were really crazy, and I feel really passionate about this idea of us not biting and devouring one another. Not being known as the only army that kills its wounded. I think that's so anti-Christ. I think there's so many things about Christianity that are so anti-Christ and so anti-Paulinian, so anti just following Jesus. I can't believe it. And it breaks my heart, and it's exhausting. It is exhausting. And I'm grateful that for all the people out there who are working hard for this kind of stuff, I'm grateful that I'm seeing more people talk about it. I'm grateful for the people who are speaking out on other issues right now that are so important. People are speaking out against what's going on with Israel and Palestine. People who are speaking out against what's going on with immigration right now and things like that. I'm speaking about some of those things, but I see some people who do it so well and so great, and I'm so grateful for those folks. And that's another thing, is maybe sharing your gratitude with others of people who are doing things well, because a little encouragement really does go a long way. And it's so easy to be discouraging. It's so easy to just be, just shit on people. It's so easy to just say horrible things. But I've had a few people share like what these talks have meant to them, just through Instagram lately, and it really just meant the world to me. Or on Facebook, and I get a lot of horrible stuff too, but man, 1 or 2 of those good things. Now, it used to be that I get 10, 20 good things back in my popular heyday, and then I get 1 bad thing and I'd focus on that. Well, now I get like 10 bad things, but I get 1 good thing, and I really now focus on, I'm really able to focus on that and go, oh, this is why I do the work. I want to share that hope with other people. I want to share a way that we start a movement, that we start a revolution for reformation through love and through grace, and that we all have hope for a better tomorrow and a better future through this. So I'm not even thinking about the afterlife. I'm just thinking, how could we get through this one, folks? So listen, if you like the work and you like what we're doing, Revolution needs your support. Revolution desperately needs your financial support. I hate asking this, but it's just part of the party, part of the game, part of this work. You can go to revolutionchurch.com and make a tax-deductible donation. We have Venmo and we have PayPal, and you can do either one of those, and we would be really grateful for that. Nothing's too small, nothing's too big. We really could use your support. We really need it right now. I get about half of my, I've gotten about half of what I would usually get this year. I've not gotten full pay in a month. I usually get about half a pay in my month, and that allows me to at least pay for my rent. And then the other stuff I do is I work other jobs to help pay for groceries and things like that. But we could really use your support to continue this work and to move forward. And it helps get clarity when we're able to handle the budget. Things are a little bit clearer, and allows this work to be a little bit better. So if you love what we're doing, you encourage what we're doing, and you'd like to see more of it, consider making a donation. And you go, Jay, we don't have any money. What do we do? Share, review, like, and subscribe. Share these talks with your friends. Share these talks with your family. Share share these talks on social media. Share them with people, leave a comment, let people know what we're doing, because that's really helpful to bring people in, invite people, say, hey, listen, we're going to watch live on Sunday at 11 a.m. Why don't you come watch it with us? We can send each other messages every time Jay repeats something or says, or something. We can have a drink. You can make a drinking game out of it, whatever you want. No, but seriously, share it with people, get people involved. Let's do more, not less. I want to do more, but we can only do that with your support. So please consider doing that at Revolution Church. That's right, revolutionchurch.com. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Remember to love each other. Remember, we got to be connected. We got to show grace. We got to show mercy to each other. Grace is anarchy. We've got to learn to argue well, and that is going to lead us into a reformation. And I am here to say I am here to help lead that reformation into the future to make a better church, a better community, and better followers of grace and hope and love in Christ. So there you go. Delusions of grandeur. Bye-bye.